Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much. Good afternoon. Happy primary day, Pennsylvania primary day. Um, as we kind of have people coming into the webinar, just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Patrick Morgan. I'm a fellow for Civic Design at Drexel's Lindy Institute. And thank you for joining us for Urban Strategy in the Present Tense, or as I call it, what civic leader can we get to come on a webinar at 4 o'clock on Tuesday? It's a webinar series powered by the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation, in partnership with generous support from the Lindy family, and in partnership with Westphal College at Drexel University. The title of our program this afternoon is Governing the City Now, a conversation. And at the heart of that conversation is Tiffany Thurman, an accomplished public professional and doer, GSDer, get stuff doneer in city governance. And in today's conversation, Tiffany and I will explore what it takes to govern a major American city now. Obviously, we'll be taking a hyperlocal view of Philadelphia, and how people can work together to find solutions and address complex problems. Tiffany Thurman is Chief of Staff to Mayor Cherelle Parker. She brings years of experience turning vision into reality, or vision into action, I should say, also reality. In her current role, she manages a variety of departments that deliver city services, oversees daily operations in the executive office or the mayor's office, and provides leadership for divisions that support policy, planning, and communications. And I'm sure, Tiffany, there's a bunch of other things I'm missing there. And I think just to kind of frame a little bit of the conversation, and I think conversations that we've had with other leaders, in some ways, Philadelphia is on an upswing, right? And I think I'm kind of borrowing some things from the recent Pew State of the City. So, we're on an upswing, Philadelphia, but I think in some other ways, the city is confronting challenges, some of which familiar, some of which are newly emerging. And again, like I said, we've kind of been exploring these dynamics and recent conversations in this series, and also kind of exploring data and best practices, and how they are also helping city leaders respond to the moment that we're in. Today, we'll explore how big picture strategy gets translated into policy and action across the city. We're also going to take a step back and frame the conversation a little bit more broadly, if that's okay, to reflect Tiffany's career path and her longtime public service across not just local, but state levels. All right, so before we get started, two quick housekeeping notes. Number one, for the best experience, set your speaker, I messed that up. Set your screen to speaker view. All right, number two, I won't mess this one up. Throughout the conversation, like we always do, we encourage you to to share your thoughts and questions in the chat. We'll bring some of your questions to Tiffany. Maybe I'll respond to some as well, probably in the final like 10 minutes of the program. So, all right, Tiffany, you're up.
Well, thank you so much, Patrick. It's really good to see you. So Patrick and I were former colleagues under the Kenney administration, and we had a small overlap under Parks and Recreation. I know you all had Catherine Otlevel on a few weeks ago, and then Prima Gupta, and really honored to be the third in the series that you have going on. You have some very powerful women who I also, work with and also very much admire. Really happy to be here. So I know you've shared a lot already about my background. Just honored to serve under Mayor Parker, first woman mayor, first African-American woman mayor in 341 years. We are certainly making history. It is my second time around, being in the trenches with Mayor Parker. I call myself a Parker boomerang. So, when Governor Wolf came into office, his first year and as governor, I served as Mayor Parker, who was then State Representative Cherelle Parker. I served as her executive director for the Philadelphia delegation with the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. And it was literally out of the pan into the fire. That was the governor's first year. It was the mayor's last year, because shortly after I joined, she announced that she was running for city council. And we experienced one of the longest budget impasse in the Commonwealth in a very long time. And so that was a very exciting year. I was in grad school at the time at University of Pennsylvania at Fell School of Government. So reading about government, learning about, best practices with negotiations, and then doing it in real time. So that was an exciting time over 11 years ago. Joined the Kinney administration, did a lot of work under Rebuild, of course, in partnership with Catherine Ottlevel, who was then commissioner. I served as her chief of staff, and then had an amazing opportunity to join Accenture. Hello, David. I see you in the chat. That's right. Class of our 2016 cohort. Really good to see you there. And thanks for joining today. But had an opportunity to join Accenture and to leave local government, but to expand my practice and to build a public sector practice across the Commonwealth. And on my first day on the job, we had something called a pandemic. We didn't know it was a pandemic at the time. It was just called the coronavirus. And we were all under this notion that we would be in quarantine for about 2 weeks. And so it was, hunker down. And that 2 weeks turned into way longer than 2 weeks, several years. But my practice at Accenture at the time grew overnight because it was an amazing moment, right? To bring real, government sector solutions, in real time across the country. So I was able to work with local governments in other states, not just here in the Commonwealth, and did that for a while, became a mom, a foster mom, adopted our daughter, my husband and I, and went into the nonprofit sector. Got off the fast moving train for a little while until the mayor called during her transition and asked me to serve in a very unique role, to serve both as her chief of staff, but also to have the functionality of a chief deputy mayor as well. So I have all of the roles and responsibilities of a traditional chief of staff, but I also have a huge portfolio of my own work and my own direct reports around our chief legal counsel, the integrity office, our new office of policy planning and delivery reports to me. I have the airports in my portfolio, handle all the economic development work. So of course, last year with the Sixers deal, I led that for the city alongside of course, our amazing city solicitor, Renee Garcia, and doing some amazing work right now, planning and development, Jesse Lawrence and Angela Brooks, our new chief housing and development officer, both report to me. So, leading a tip of the spear, as they say, with our home initiative. So just really excited. And on the weekends, I sleep. So really excited to serve at this time.
No, thanks so much, Tiffany. And again, as a fellow Felsian and friend of many years, and you gave us a great rundown, so I appreciate that. But you've held a number of leadership positions, like you said, across nonprofits, private sector. We had this short stint together in Parks and Rec, in Harrisburg, and I think again when you were kind of first connected with, then Rep Parker / chair of the Philly delegation, right?
That's right.
So again, kind of wanted to kind of ask you about like what is something that travels over from your work and time across those various sectors into now, right? And
Yes.
how is being chief of staff to Mayor Parker, different than anything you've done before?
Well, I'm a pioneer and an achiever, just naturally. I'm just naturally wired that way. And when I think of, you talked about, getting stuff done. I'm from Columbus, Georgia, although I'm not Philly born. I'm Temple made. And been here for 25 years and still considered a transplant, but that's just, how the city is. But when I hear, folks say get stuff done, right? We say back home, get her done, right? And that's who I am. I'm a get her done type of girl. And so, my mantra, something that has stayed with me, throughout my career, is to lead with grace, to lead with integrity, to not do double talk, and to really ensure that there's alignment across whether it's my portfolio or the people that I'm working with, right? It is how I approach, big systems, complex negotiations, and how I address, small day-to-day problems that, if they're not addressed, could turn into a big wildfire. So just leading with grace and integrity is really, really at the core of who I am.
Yeah, and I think and something that I think, at least in my opinion, kind of bonds people who, spend time in city government is that, you're running into these, walls of bureaucracy together, right? And
Absolutely.
sometimes arm in arm, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that does kind of fuse you, I think,
Yeah.
in many ways. So, one thing I kind of remember fondly from our times in Park and Rec together, and especially talking about, I won't, I'm going to try to recreate the accent and it's not going to go well, but getting her done. Um,
Good job.
okay, that was generous. Thank you. When you helped to lead the campaign to help Parks and Rec provide new swimsuits, swim gear, and swim diapers to kids during the summer pool season. And for those who might not know, like, Philly has over 70 public pools, right? And for many, that summer pool season is a civic tradition. So I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that. That's a really fond memory that that I have of our time together.
Yeah, when I think back to that, I remember, the team came to me, Catherine and Mayor Kenny, and said, we don't want there to be any barriers, to kids having a fun and safe experience in the city. When I think about that, when I think about, even my approach now to some of the really, really big problems that we are faced with, even now, with whether it's, what's happening at Ground Zero in Kensington, what's happening around housing affordability or lack thereof, I lead in the same way. If I see a problem, my goal is to think really strategically about how can we fix it together. Right. And that's not just a mantra or a feel good thing. Right. It's bringing all of the people into the room and thinking about it with a real kind of intergovernmental collaboration type of way. And I keep going back to home because, of course, it's top of mind. But if you look at the executive order, that's exactly what it does. You talked about barriers and bureaucracy. What the home executive order said was, it starts with us. It starts with the city leaders first. What are the barriers? What is the red tape that we, have put in place? How can we uncomplicate systems, right? How can we, look at, our L&I practices, look at, how we approach things in our planning with our planning commission, and think strategically, across the board. And how do we make, housing affordability, or housing or home ownership, or even, rental, security? How do we make that easier for Philadelphians? It shouldn't be, a cumbersome, complicated process. And that's been, how we've approached everything in government to date. One of the things I remember, we were putting together our year one budget, and we were working well late into the night, which, productivity is my love language. So it's like, you want an all-nighter. I've been doing it since eighth grade. It's just how I'm wired. And for better or worse, right? For better or worse. And I remember, sitting with the mayor and our other chief deputy mayors at the time. The mayor calls us, the three of us, her big three. And we were just talking about just all of the status quo, things, that we were facing, that we were looking to kind of overcome with this very ambitious year one budget. And, I remember coming from a military family, I was like, Mayor, it just seems like we're just at war constantly. And she's like, you know what, Tiffany, you're damn right. We are at war. We're at war with the status quo. And so if you've been to, any press conference, if you've been to any major announcement, any announcement of new leaders, you've heard the mayor say that in her year two budget address, in our year one budget address, and other work that we've done, that we've rolled out over the last 2 years, or it feels like 2 years, but the last year and a half. We really are approaching this, of how do we, obstruct the status quo and really usher in a new government. And this is a critical time, not just because of what's happening at the federal level, but because of what's happened to get here, right? All the the time that we've lost, because of COVID, going back to COVID and thinking about that time period. And so we have a unique opportunity here, and I couldn't be more excited and truly honored to serve alongside of the mayor at this time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tiffany. And I think I'm gonna have to borrow the productivity is my love language. That just that really, yeah, that really hits home. And it kind of put me in those meetings, right? Those kind of
Yeah.
all-nighters. So and you kind of said it's a battle, right? So I think this kind of leads to my next question. And from my experience, right? And I was a chief of staff, but it was never a chief of staff kind of at your level. But I guess from my experience within city government, chief of staff is one of the most demanding roles in city government, right?
It
I think
is.
it's really right up there with like police commissioner, maybe budget director. It's challenging in its own way, right? And I think, you then in your role, you also have to kind of keep up with a very high energy mayor, right?
Yes,
You have a young family,
I do.
you mentioned that. But I also think, so you have all that, but I also think like chief of staff it's a challenging job, but I think most people don't know much about it, maybe other than what they've seen on kind of like West Wing, right? For me,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was CJ Craig, right? Leo was great, but it was a CJ Craig, right? Or quite frankly, even, seasons 4 or 5 of The Wire, right? So listen, I'm sure there's no kind of typical day for you, but can you let us in a little bit on, how do you approach the day to day of being a chief of staff for a major American city? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, it's really being comfortable in the unknown, right? So
Yeah,
because yes, I have my days planned, I like I said, I both serve in the role as a traditional chief of staff, but I also have my direct reports. So of course, I'm organized. I have my check-ins with my team. But we also have a city that where yes, homicide is down 40%. But we just recently, unfortunately, had an officer involved shooting that occurred right outside of Overbrook. And when that happens, we stop and we go. Right.
yeah,
So it's always being ready. Now I'm naturally wired. I talked about being a big systems thinker. I'm an achiever, a pioneer. I'm also from a military family. And so, my brother, who is, we're only 10 and a half months apart. We've been in competition since I came, 10 months after him, right, on Earth. But he just retired from the Marine Corps as a sergeant major. So,
wow,
the top of the top, 23 years, 4 tours, in Iraq, did some, recon in other countries. And when I sit and talk with him, folks like him and his battle buddies really help to put things in perspective. For me, we're at war with the status quo, but we're not at war with one another. So that's one. So when I look at, the elected officials that I have to build with in order to get a bill passed, when I look at, folks that have been in government for a very long time and only, as the mayor says, know how to sharpen their pencil one way. And we're saying, wait, we're not using pencils anymore. Now we're using ink pens, right? It's, I think about it I think about it very strategically, but I'm always ready. I'm always ready for the unknown and unexpected. And that's why it's important to have someone like myself in the role where I'm naturally wired to do that, but also integrity is paramount for me. If I'm not known for anything else, I want to be known for the fact that I lead with integrity, I lead with grace, and I'm gonna get it done. I'm gonna
yeah,
get it done.
yeah,
So I think folks who are naturally wired like that can thrive really well in this type of role, right? Being a chief of staff, it's solving a lot of problems, and if you see my name in the paper, I'm not doing it right because I serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and I really am honored to do so. And so, whether it's working on complex problems like encampments at our very prestigious universities, as the Eds and Meds town, or helping our police force through very difficult times, and coming alongside of our police commissioner Bethel and our Office of Public Safety new director Gear, or working through complex negotiations that only make it to the light of day once we are ready to go and say that we've reached a deal. It is always kind of just having to be at the ready and having a high capacity. I think that my capacity for problem solving came because of things that were beyond my control, like a budget impasse, or serving at Parks and Recreation during a time when homicide wasn't down. It was the reverse, where we weren't just serving in the role. It wasn't just slides and swings, is what we used to always say, right, Pat? Right. It's like that's not what we were doing at that time. Scandal was really big. Kerry Washington,
Oh,
everyone knew about Olivia Pope, everyone knew about Leslie Knope. And so I would always say back then, I'm noping and poping, right? So I did that on a smaller scale. That, right? Really funny, right? But you understand what I'm saying. You understand
I
what
remember
we're
that.
doing.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And so, but being able to do that for that department, the wasn't an easy task, right? We had
Yeah.
the largest urban park system in the nation, take that, New York. And we were able to do that at a very strategic time when we were making a historic investment in our parks, playgrounds, and infrastructure. And if I could do that for 11% of our land at the city at that time, I was able to then grow in capacity there. And I see a lot of our PPR friends in the
Oh my
chat.
God.
So shout
Yeah.
out to you all. I love it. Ray, Brian, just love the support there.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of I wish I could keep up with the chat. I'm not that good. But yeah, though shout out to I would say I'm incredibly biased, but the best city department out there, Philly Parks and Rec. I know you can't say that, Tiff, but I can, right? They're all
And
the
I will not
best.
correct you.
Good, good. Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing that there's a lot that you're kind of saying that really responds to me. And I really appreciate you sharing about, your brother, because I think it also, it's one of the things we're trying to do with this series is I think not just kind of talk about the work, but kind of like what is animating, what is fueling people, to do the work, right? And I
Yeah.
often think, one theme that has been, at least in these conversations, has been it's deeply personal, right? And
Yeah.
to do what you do, right, you're pulling from what is core to you, right?
Yes.
So again, thank you for sharing that. um when I was thinking about our conversation, I was reminded of the LBJ quote, the President Johnson quote that goes something like this, and maybe someone could correct me in the chat, but LBJ said, "When the burdens of the presidency seem unusually heavy, I always remind myself it could be worse. I could be a mayor."
That's right.
I
That's right.
think I mean, again, this is someone who is dealing with
Yeah.
Vietnam, who is dealing
Yep.
with a number
Yep.
of things, right?
Yep.
But I think as I was thinking about our conversation, Tiffany, I think that quote is kind of fitting for our current time. And, you kind of outlined it up top so nicely. Mayors are the closest to the problems, they're the
That's right.
closest to the people, right? And for big city mayors, the issues of, crime, infrastructure, education, quality of life are front and center 24/7.
That's right.
And I think everything about what a city is ends up on the mayor's desk. And in many ways, you are one of the closest to the mayor, so it's on your desk too, right?
That's right. That's right.
So listen, I'll just get right to it, right? I think, in this very difficult time, things are moving in so many directions at once. Can you offer us a sense or some insights around where does Mayor Parker, like where do you focus?
Yeah.
Where are you trying to move the needle? And what are some specific outcomes that you have to kind of gauge that progress?
Absolutely. So, traditionally, most administrations will have that one big thing that they're known for, right? That the one big initiative. And of course, they're moving the ball upstream, as they say, moving the needle, as you just mentioned. Uh, you know, uh, we, unlike other, more recent mayors, are focused on several initiatives, not just one big initiative. So I've talked a little bit about home, preserving and building 30,000 new units in the next 2 years. When I think about our safety, right, and looking at prevention, intervention, and enforcement, and thinking very strategically about how we not just tackle but dismantle the open air drug market and totally revitalize and rejuvenate what's happening down in Kensington right now, right? And we're doing that in all sorts of ways. And some of that stuff is public. Much of it isn't, because what we don't want to do is to beat our own chest, right? To give ourselves a pat on the back. I'll give you a little insight, right? We are not an Ivy Tower type of administration. Very, I'm here only when I have to be in this office. We want to be out in the community. The mayor as well. So the mayor has, she has office hours in Kensington. So on a certain day of the week, if you need to meet with her about city business, you're meeting with her at her office in Kensington. Because what we're saying to people, whether they're business owners, other dignitary leaders, our cabinet member staff, if you think that you're too good, right, to come to Kensington, then we don't want to meet with you because you don't align with our values. And don't come to Kensington when the cameras are on and when it's when it's time to do a story. Don't see it as their problem. It's our problem. It's a city problem, right? And so that's how we're leading in many ways. That's just one example. We talk a lot about our agenda around being the safest, cleanest, greenest big city in America with economic opportunity for all. And so when I think about that LBJ quote, what I think about is, we've heard it all the time. Politics are local. So yeah, we have the local politics, right? That we're constantly, we constantly have to dance with, right? It's a delicate, beautiful dance and a wonderful opportunity, but we're laser focused on how do we ensure that the city is safer? How do we ensure that it's cleaner? Right? Like, and ensuring that we don't just stay in last place, whether it's from an economic mobility perspective. I know many of the folks, who are on today, you're on because you're informed. So you likely are aware of the Raj Teddy data that came out from the professor at Harvard University. We fall into last place. Or if you think about the city, is known as being the biggest poorest city, in the nation. So it's how do we not just dispel that notion, but really from a data-driven perspective, prove and demonstrate how we're moving from last place, how we're not the filthiest, right? So we're holding ourselves accountable through Philly Stat 360. You all can go on Philly Stat 360 right now and look at our goals and see where we are today. It's our own report card. But what we're saying is, unlike my brother, right? That accomplished sergeant major that I talked about, who would hide his report card, when
Oh
they
no.
were in grade school, we're not leading that way. We're leading from the front. We want to lead by example. So we're holding ourselves accountable first. And one way of doing that is through Philly Stat 360, but it's also looking at non-traditional ways of interacting with and engaging with the public. We do that also, not just with our office hours, but with the budget town halls and the other town halls that we've had as well. So going back to the Sixers negotiations last year, there was a lot of noise. That noise was persistent long before the start of the Mayor Parker administration. But what we said was, instead of fighting back through social media, we're going to go and meet with people in their neighborhoods. We're going to present the information and we're going to answer their questions, whether they agree with us or not. What we don't want people to say is that there's a cone of silence and secrecy, that we are operating, without the people in mind, that we're not listening to the people. No one can say that. Or let me say that. Let me say this. Let me say it differently. They can say it, but it's not true. Because there's not one neighborhood that we've not gone to have difficult conversations, to have, the hard conversations around how do you take, in a budget constrained environment, how do you think about things like economic mobility, things like ensuring that we don't stay in last place when it comes to cleanliness? How do you ensure that our airports are cleaner? We have the airport president and CEO and those town halls with us. We have the head of our, of every department in those town halls with us. So we have a government, as the Mayor Parker says, and as I always repeat, that people can see, touch, and feel, not one that they have to, email and never hear back from.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. I mean, so it sounds like you kind of mentioned a couple of different kind of both, qualitative and quantitative, kind of ways to, measure, so you had the economic mobility, poverty rate, probably, things like litter index, right?
Yes, yes.
But then you're also kind of, you know, meeting people where they are, right, via the budget town halls, and I think just other mechanisms where you see yourself out there, right?
Yes,
And again, I mean, again, harkens back to me of, those park and rec days where, when you're 13% of the city's land mass, right? Like park and rec is like, you got to be out there, right? You
that's
don't,
right. That's
you
right.
don't, really, you don't really have, you don't have an option, right? Because you're
That's right.
already there, because you're already out there. So, yeah, and then again, kind of putting that all into, kind of, what's the best way to, not just inform your own decision making, but then to
That's right.
communicate that, right? Communicate that back, because, like, as you said, you know, you're going to try to be as transparent as you can be about how decisions are made, and people might not, agree with that, right?
That's
But
right.
at least they won't be like, well, I didn't know, right? How,
That's right. Last week we hosted a budget town hall in Torresdale. And at the end of the town hall, there was a gentleman, older gentleman, that came up to our budget director, Rob DeBow, who has served in government for about 20 years now, actually more. And he came up to Rob, and he was really grumpy. So as Rob shared the story with me, and he's like, I don't like the mayor, and I came here to let her know that face to face. He was like, but I gotta let you know, I'm leaving different. And so Rob, being who he is, says, well, how so? And the older gentleman said to Rob, I have hope. I have hope. And I was like, what?
Wow.
Whoa. Wow. And so that's what it is. We're not trying to, we want to hear from people, and we want people to hear from us. And then they can make an informed decision, not just about how they feel about the mayor, but how they feel about the city that accepted the call to work for them. And that's how I see my role, right? I said yes. When I said yes to Mayor Parker, I said yes to 1.5 million people. And I meant that, and I take it very seriously.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. And it reminded me of the old Leslie Knope, people caring loudly.
People
And
caring loudly. That's right. They're not yelling. They're just people caring loudly. That's
exactly.
right. But they have a
And
right
I
to do so. They have a right to do
absolutely. And I love that Rob was like, tell me more. Yeah, anyway. All right. So I mean, you mentioned it a couple times now, Tiffany, and I think, specifically kind of moving the needle, right? So the mayor announced really, I would say, kind of historic, right? I know that word gets kind of tossed around quite a bit, but I think this is, appropriate. A $2 billion housing initiative or push, right? You kind of you mentioned the home plan, right? And I think, listen, for those in the chat, or for those who are following along, we could probably spend the entire time talking about just this, right? For starters. But I think for starters, I was kind of thought, maybe we can begin with, like, how does the administration kind of clearly define the housing problem, the housing crisis? And can you speak to, like, what is the broad framework of the home plan, right? It's a complex subject. So, maybe you can start off with, a quick breakdown of some of the key pieces initiative that are under home.
Absolutely. And shameless plug, next Thursday, we will have a housing town hall. You can go on our website, or look on our social media to learn more about that. But next week we will be hosting a town hall, up near the northeast section of the city of Philadelphia. We will be live streaming it as well. And so it's about preserving and building 30,000 housing units, right? It's about preservation and also bringing on new housing stock. We talk about aging infrastructure within city assets, but we also have aging infrastructure within the housing stock, right? Like, the average home is older than most other cities, right? Comparably speaking, amongst the 10th largest cities in the nation. And so the first thing that we did, we went on a learning journey. So when we started, so when actually, let me go back. When the mayor ran, when she ran for office, she talked about housing affordability. She talked about 30,000 units then. And so when we came into office last year, people were expecting us to roll out the plan then. And the mayor's like, we're not going to it's like sharpen the axe really well. You don't have to sharpen it again. I know I just butchered that saying, but what we did was last year we went on a learning journey. So we looked at, what are other cities doing that are in similar, places or spaces in terms of their housing stock. What we learned in both red and blue states, big and small cities, rural and suburban neighborhoods, that there's a housing crisis nationally. Now, Philadelphia is amongst one of the largest cities that's leading the pack there. But we looked at cities like Chicago and the city of Atlanta, and we looked at what is their approach and what investments have they made. And then we pulled on some really, really thought-provoking, really intelligent experts. We're working with Greg Heller as one of our consultants with Guidehouse, and of course, the Ira Goldstein, right, with the reinvestment fund. And we looked at the data, not just around our aging housing stock, but also what type of investment would it take to going back to what you said earlier, to move the needle in the right direction, to see true systemic change in the city of Philadelphia around not just housing affordability, but how can we impact every neighborhood? Because the previous plans that we looked at, they were more expansive. So they looked at over a decade, right? And they didn't look at every neighborhood and what investments would look like in every neighborhood. So in taking that approach, we went on a 1 year, very extensive a process. And based on the data, we learned that we would need to make a $2 billion investment. Now that's looking at land valuation at around $1 billion, a bond, looking at bonds as an investment, right? But looking at a $800 million bond, and then working with the philanthropic community, working with, our state and federal partners at investing an additional $200 million to come up with that $2 billion valuation into this home initiative. What that will mean for Philadelphia in every neighborhood, we want to make sure that whether you have a market rate home or a home that is built under that affordable, section or sector rather, that no matter what neighborhood you're in, you should look at the fixtures, the finishings, the outside, the inside, and not be able to tell neighborhood by neighborhood. And that goes right back to the data that we see from Raj Chetty around economic mobility. It's that social interconnectedness that's going to move us out of 50th place right into a more competitive place. And we've seen it happen in the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. And so working with partners like Comcast and the philanthropic community, we're thinking about workforce housing. We're also thinking about housing as a retention tool for police and firefighters and teachers. And so workforce housing as well, but thinking very comprehensively, because it's a comprehensive, complex problem. We're thinking very comprehensively on how we can address that problem to where we see generational impact.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. Again, that was a lot to kind of unpack. So, really, really appreciate it. I mean, just kind of a quick follow-up, and you mentioned some of the data, but like what are some of the most important numbers, data supporting the home plan that you think people, should know?
I think the most important data, I think let me just, it's more, we deal a lot with the qualitative, but I want to, with the quantitative, but I want to go to the qualitative. The most important data point from a qualitative perspective is that this home plan is for everyone.
Mm.
Right? We're looking at people who are in the low to moderate income bracket. We're also, looking at people who are more moderate income, right? But still, have faced real barriers for other external reasons to home ownership for those who are aspiring to home ownership. In a recent article, I was quoted as saying, we don't want to pit the haves against the have-nots or the have against the have just a little bit. The way that the mayor explained that is, or described that is, those people that make just a little bit over the income eligibility threshold that would prevent them from getting, access to or becoming eligible in some of the current, programs that we offer through local government and even state and federal government. And we see that. In fact, there's a story that we tell of an employee actually in city council that was up for promotion, but that said, wait a minute, I want you to delay my promotion so that I can qualify for this benefit because I've aspired to home ownership and I would be be the first in my family to own a home. And when I heard that story, it wasn't a proud moment, right? It's like, what barriers, again, going back to that executive order, in our best intention, what barriers in local government have we put in place that would have a government employee saying, don't give me that well-earned, well-deserved raise, because if you do that, and it wasn't like, an extensive raise, but it was just enough that will prevent that person from being eligible to having their lifelong dream met, right? It's called the American dream. We
Yeah.
shouldn't have policies in place that prevent people from reaching the American dream. And not every person has a dream of home ownership. We have people that are saying, no, I'm a renter. I have other aspirations, but I have issues around, weatherization that I need support with. Or going back to the home ownership side, there are basic repairs that people need because of the aging housing stock throughout the city, and they can't get those basic repairs done because we have an extensive waiting list. Well, through the borrowing that we're doing through the bond investment, and also, the support that we're looking to bring on through the support from the Commonwealth, as well as the philanthropic community and the trades, we're looking to remove those long-standing barriers that prevented folks from reaching what I'm calling a Philadelphia dream, not just an American dream. People want to live in
Yeah.
the city, and they shouldn't have to move outside of the city in order to achieve home ownership. So yes, there are some real quantitative numbers that are important, but that qualitative piece is, I don't want to overlook that. It's not just
Yeah.
a story, right? These are people's
Mhm.
lives that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think it kind of gears towards, the impact investing nature of, what
Exactly.
what you all are trying to do. I mean, I think one of the things that kind of jumped out for me quantitatively, right? And we can kind of engage those in the chat, but
Yeah.
I'd be interested, does anyone know the number of homes in Philadelphia that are currently requiring investment to maintain quality and livability? So drop the number into the chat. Let's see who gets to the closest. You'll get urban strategy in the present tense tote bag, which we don't have those. Repeat the question. All right. So does anyone know the number of homes in Philly that are currently requiring investment to maintain quality and livability? So what the number is, if people can make a guess and drop it into the chat, we'll see who gets to the closest. And Tiffany, you're not eligible. All right, I actually can't open the. All right, well, that's a high. That's a little high, right? Does anyone else have any guesses? So the number of homes that require. Okay, these are all a little high. That's okay though. So currently, the number of homes in Philadelphia requiring investment to maintain quality and livability is around 22,000. Which again, some of the numbers in the chat were pretty high. But I think for me, 22,000 is a pretty high number, in and of itself, right? So,
And it may
um,
feel higher because all you have to do is drive around any neighborhood, right? We have a city of neighborhoods, but this issue is not unique to just one section of the city. So
yeah,
I wasn't surprised by the high numbers because it's because of what people are seeing, right? I
yeah.
think for me, even that is telling, right? It speaks to the need of investments now.
Yeah. And I think kind of just Philly's aged housing stock and quite frankly, kind of high rate of home ownership too, right? Or some,
Absolutely.
yeah. So we are probably going to transition into the chat now in, some of the time that we have left. So I will kind of curate that if that's okay, Tiffany.
Sounds good.
Um, One second, let me pull it up here. All right, great. So we got some good questions here. Appreciate it, everybody. Mark would like to know, and just for sake of time, I'm going to try to shorten some of these questions. So again, if I don't get it verbatim, right, just, give me a little bit of a pass. But Mark has a question here, kind of, again, just my summary of it. Um, what is kind of the city doing around, proactive beautification, bike lanes, tree plantings, flower boxes, the arts, right? And I guess this question is kind of geared towards like, is there a specific department that has a mandate to make Philadelphia a more beautiful city? I know Carlton Williams has the, clean and green effort. Obviously,
Yes,
we spoke with Parks and Rec,
yes.
mural arts. So yeah, I don't know how you want to kind of handle that one,
Yeah, so
Tiffany.
we have a new office of clean and green that's led by Carlton Williams, and so under him, of course, is the Philadelphia More Beautiful project, and that initiative that's still going. We have new investments in that unit and that division. We also have, of course, sanitation, and they have a dotted line to through the advisory board that they have through initiatives that are like led under Jane Golden's team with mural arts. So they're being very, very intentional in their approach to cleaning and greening the entire city. And I remember a few weeks ago, my daughter, my 9-year-old, it was a Saturday, and my daughter's like, "Mom, it's clean and green, it's clean and green," and she knows like all the mantras, put your ones up in the air, one Philly, a city united. So I was just thinking, this is my daughter being my daughter, and she's like, "No, Mom, they're outside." And so I don't know why my husband did this, but he grabbed his phone. He goes running out. So I go after them, and it's the clean and green team cleaning our block and on a Saturday. And it was, and we went out with them. And so, didn't know my block was being scheduled, didn't know it was going to happen. I've had other people, send me emails about the same thing, about the twice weekly trash pickup that's been piloted and growing in other sections of the city now. About how, there's no mystery if the city is on a holiday when their trash is going to be picked up. There's just more transparency and more of just a concerted effort, a coordinated effort to not just clean the city, but to make those critical investments. And you'll see more beautification efforts, of course, leading up to 2026, but it won't just stop there, right? We don't just want to clean up for when folks come to visit, right? We want to have a clean city, a safe city, a green city for us, right? For the folks that live, work, and play here. So I appreciate that question. If you are interested in joining our clean and green roundtable or other roundtables that we have, I would encourage you to reach out to Donovan West, who leads that work, who leads the mayor's business roundtables. There are different roundtables under that body of work, and whether it's under Donovan or Carlton Williams, we're always looking for folks to join, and whether it's in the traditional sense of working with their block captains, or if you have some ideas that you'd like to see the city going and doing in that regard, you can reach out to Carlton Williams for that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. And we can maybe, drop some info into the chat.
Yep,
You mentioned 2026, so I'll put one plug in for, clean and green here is, volunteering in your park with the Park Friends,
absolutely.
Park Friends Network. I can think of no better way to show democracy in action than, working and volunteering in your local park or,
In your rec
local
center.
library, your rec
That's right.
center,
That's
right?
right. So, and we've added a new component there. So you have your parks, your rec centers, your libraries, and we also have our neighborhood community action centers. We call them NCACs because, of course, we're government and everything has to have an acronym. But our neighborhood community action centers, we have one action center in every district. Some of them are partnered with our recreation department, so they're housed at a recreation center or at a library. So you can learn more about what the city is doing beyond clean and green or including clean and green through our neighborhood action centers. But also that's a really great way to get plugged into all the great work that's happening within the administration as well.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. I think we have time for one more question, and it comes from Alan Lindy. again, we wouldn't be here without his
Absolutely.
generosity, and the generosity of Elaine, I think, is also on the webinar, and quite frankly, the Lindy family as a whole. So I could fit of no better way than let them have the final question. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize. We will kind of try to keep those in the chat, maybe do some follow up offline. But again, I'm going to kind of truncate Alan's question if that's okay. I think, what is the city doing to continue to lower, the poverty rate? Obviously, you spoke about Charlotte as an example. You spoke about the barriers of home ownership. I got to imagine that's a way to kind of, continue to kind of bring that, poverty rate down. And like you said, kind of, get us out of the ranking of, biggest poor city in the country. So if you can kind of speak to, what else is the city doing to kind of continue to lower, the poverty rate?
Sure. We're partnered with our our Philadelphia legislative delegations, both on the House and Senate side in the Commonwealth, to push for raising the minimum wage. So that is something that we have been advocating for as an administration from day one. So that's really important. But we also rolled out a really new initiative that I don't know that people make that connection to the poverty rate, but I want to talk about this for a moment. So it's our City College for Municipal Employment. It's the first of its kind, free, opportunity to get into local government and receive a free education through whether it's workforce development, through new partnerships that we're rolling out, through a wonderful work that we're doing with whether it's life sciences, biotech, in partnership with the Community College of Philadelphia. So it's a earn while you learn model. What we're saying is we don't want people to have to, again, like the woman that I talked about in city council, we don't want people to have to leave the workforce, right, in order to gain, additional education experience so that they can qualify for their next job. So through our City College for Municipal Employment, we're looking at those hard to fill jobs and we're saying, come join city government, go through the program, get the education you need while also earning a stipend, a living wage, and also working with the city of Philadelphia with guaranteed employment in that field upon successful completion of the program. We have our first cohort of graduates that will be graduating. But if it's not this week, it's next week. So really excited about that. We have new partnerships coming. I talked about life sciences and biotech. Have a great announcement that's happening with our City College for Municipal Employment that will occur on Friday, May 30th. So stay tuned for that. But that's what I mean by not just thinking about that one big initiative, but thinking about initiatives that connected together, right, will really move the needle in the right direction to ensuring that we don't just move out of 50th place, but that we can look back 20 and 30 years from now and say, it was because of those initiatives that were birthed under the Parker administration that it was a new renaissance that happened. We talked about the glory days of Rendell. I don't want to just talk about the glory days of Rendell anymore. And not that I see that as looking in the rearview mirror, but I want to talk about what we're doing now, right? To ensuring that my 9-year-old, when she's here, because she did say that she's gonna, run against me for chief of staff. So whether it's here or in the future, whatever she chooses to do, that we're leaving, a safer city, but a more economically vibrant city for her and for your children as well, Pat. So really excited about that. And Alan, thank you so much for the question, and thank you for all that you're doing to bring about programs like this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tiffany. And I appreciate how you kind of mentioned, leveraging eds and meds too, because that was something that Alan kind of pointed out in the question. I had to kind of truncate it for time. So, listen, I just want to kind of close things out by, first of all, just thanking you, right? Not just for your time today, but, quite frankly, thank you for doing what you do. As we talked about up top, everything about what is a city ends up on the mayor's desk and in turn your desk, right? People look to city government whether you have the power to do anything about it or not, right? And you mentioned it's a tremendous trust, but it's also a tremendous burden governing a city now. So thank you. And my deep appreciation for everything that you're doing, Tiffany, and the team's doing. And also thank you for all of us who are joining, us this afternoon. Special shout out to our former Park and Rec colleagues. To close out the program, just want to make a final note
And
about
the
the time.
Felsians.
And the
And the
Felsians,
Philippines.
right? And I'm sure I'm missing some shout outs, so you'll get me in the chat. But thank you, Tiffany. Yeah, can't forget the Felsians. So just a final note about the title of this program. Listen, if you're curious about how cities work and how they can work better, consider the master's program in urban strategy right here at Drexel. It's a 2-year master's program that can combine design, policy, public health, public space, equipping students and professionals that take on real-world urban challenges. The program here at Drexel is built around partnerships with communities and experts like Tiffany and others that we've talked to as part of this series, preparing graduates to help shape stronger, more connected cities. Urban Strategy in the Present Tense is produced by the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation at Drexel University in partnership with the Urban Strategy Master's Program in Drexel's Westphal College of Media, Arts, and Design. As always, we are grateful to Alan Lindy, Elaine Lindy, and the entire Lindy family for their great and generous support. And finally, special thanks to Thomas Devaney. Also, happy birthday, Tom. And our production director, Hazel Dequito. Thanks for joining us, everyone, today. And again, be well. Happy Primary Day.